Today I'm speaking with Andre Forbes. Andre, thank you so much for joining me today.
All right, thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to meet you. I've heard great things about you. I believe it was Dan Barker that told me about you first. And just to give a quick bio, Andre lives in Tallahassee, Florida. He is married, has two kids, twins, a boy and a girl. He is a producer, composer, musician, songwriter, and engineer. And I'm very jealous of those skills. That's a skill set I'd love to dive into someday. He's dedicated his life to creating music that feels good. He believes music is truly a universal language that has no boundaries. He composes music in various styles, such as neo soul, gospel, rock, fusion, and more. And he's toured throughout the United States as well as Europe. He's got Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, Germany, even the Caribbean and other international areas. That's awesome. On that note, by the way, I will have the link for his YouTube channel as well as some other his website, andreforbes.com. All those links beneath this video. So please do check out his awesome work. And during his time as a Christian songwriter, Andre had two songs pre-nominated for Dove Awards, and he also made several appearances on BET, the Word Network, and TBN with featured artists. As a film composer, Andre has composed scores for several award-winning short films, including films called Underground, Our Rhineland, and Silhouettes. So I'll have the links again for his website so you can go check out his great work. But that's what I know about you so far, Andre. Before we get into your story, could you just tell us your hobbies and anything fun about yourself?
Well, I actually got more into filmmaking and animation over the past 5, 6 years. So that's one of the things I like to really, really dive into more. I made a few short films, but hopefully one day I'll be able to make a feature. And I don't know, I'm kind of not really interested in going to the Hollywood scene, but it's kind of like a hobby for me right now, but I've really taken interest in it.
Hmm, that's awesome. I'm just curious, are you in a spot where AI is coming into what you do, or is that,
Yeah.
are you more just like you got to do it all kind of step by step yourself?
AI is an interesting conversation, and that could probably be a whole nother topic. But yeah, even at my job, because I have a day job as well, and I work as a multimedia developer, and that's one of the things that we are looking at now and seeing how we can possibly integrate that into our workflow, because it's here, it's not going anywhere. So, in order not to get left behind, you kind of have to keep up with the time. So,
Yeah, agreed. And
yeah,
it seems like it's not just here, but it's getting better rapidly, which is both scary and cool at the same time.
right.
So, well, we're here, of course, to hear your story. We would love to get to know you, get to know your background. We do ask if you could to take us back to your earliest days in terms of Christianity. How did you first hear about Jesus, and how did that relationship evolve?
Wow, going way back, but okay, so I was born in New Jersey. I stayed up there for about 5 years. My dad actually got a job up there, and we moved from Florida. Well, they moved from Florida up to New Jersey, and I was born up there. And even though I was only there for 5 years, I actually remember a couple of those years, maybe when I was like 4 or 5, getting ready to leave. But I remember my earliest memory of like churchy type stuff was like going to a storefront church, I think in Newburgh. And I had a best friend at that time, and we would just be like hanging out under the chairs, not really paying attention to what's going on because we're kids. So my dad and my mom, they used to sing in a group. I remember a little bit of that. But not too much because like I said, I was a kid and kids remember stuff unless it's like very traumatic or just really enjoyable. They probably forget it later on. So I'm guessing a lot of stuff I just kind of forgot. But at the age of 5, I moved down here to Florida, and this is mainly where both of my parents' families are. My dad's family is in Tallahassee, and my mom's family was in Miami at the time. So got down here, and I got to spend time with my family that I didn't really have much of in New Jersey. Um, Everything was church. I'll just kind of lead with that. Everything was pretty much church. So we got down here. We used to have like 2 church services on Sundays. We used to go to services on weekdays, choir rehearsal, Bible study.
Hmm.
A lot of stuff was just church, and everything was kind of centered around church. And I say this not to offend anybody in my family, but I mean a lot of the things that they were doing were cult-like. So that's kind of, I'm just giving like I guess some information about what I'm going to be sharing later. But it was, with that being said, it was like a very friendly environment being inside of the church bubble. It was a lot of family. We did a lot of things together, a lot of singing, a lot of music. everything that I did mainly was with my family. Like my cousins were like my best friends. So we would like go to movies together, go out, just hang around and talk. And a lot of stuff we did was actually music based because that's that's what my mom and dad were into. But also my uncles and aunts, they sung. My cousin was actually like writing songs at the time, and I tried to get into it a little bit as well. And we just came up with a lot of Christian songs. And
Mm,
I was raised in the country for the most part when I was younger. So a lot of times we didn't have the city to just go to, or I couldn't like watch cable or anything. So I was raised on like three channels, like I think channel 6, channel 27 and 40, like the standard news channels that you might have late at night or whatever, and then PBS or something like that.
right. Do you
So we
think
had to
with
kind of
so
go.
do you think with going to church all the time, besides obviously just the excitement about it and the fervor and the community, do you think any part of that was like a sheltering aspect? Like if we keep you so busy, the devil can't get you because you're just too busy and too tired to otherwise do anything else.
I do think so, but not on the level of my parents and possibly not even my family. I think it was more just the belief itself. That's kind of one of the mechanisms, just part of it to kind of keep people away from certain things or to keep them in line a certain way. So yeah, I would say that. But to be honest, I mean, they kind of just enjoyed it. And I understand why they enjoyed it because it's like anything that you do with people that you enjoy being around is usually going to be enjoyable, even if it's something that you don't really enjoy. I mean, you can have fun doing it because of the people that you're with. So I
Yeah,
think that's kind of what it was. They enjoyed singing. They enjoyed making music. They enjoyed just talking around and fellowshipping and all of that. And to be honest, I mean that's what I enjoyed about it. I mean, it's like the fellowship. A lot of family, a lot of things that we just did together to have closeness. And I have some fond memories of the closeness that we had with all the fellowships and stuff that we had.
mm,
Um, I used to sing. I don't really sing now, but I sung in the kids choir at my church. The first time I actually became a musician or really wanted to start getting out of that was when I was sitting in the audience playing a toy keyboard one time, and my cousin heard me, and she was directing the kids choir, I believe, and she heard me just sitting in the audience playing on my toy keyboard, and she told me to come up and try to catch on to the songs that they were singing. And so I guess I kind of caught on to it because I think my dad was there as well playing guitar. Um,
that's
and
awesome.
ever since then, it's just like they just made me kind of like the church musician. So I was
Yeah,
actually nervous about doing it because like I said, I've been singing, but I'm a perfectionist to a degree. So I messed up when I first started playing and actually started crying the first time. They really had me there for a formal rehearsal because I messed up like a chord or something like that at the beginning, and I wanted to start all the way from the very beginning. So she was like, "No, we got to finish doing the song. You can't just stop because you messed up." And so it was a hard thing for me to get over. But I would say that experience actually did it had a big impact on my life because I made a career out of being a musician, producer, and everything. And I might not
mm,
have done that had my cousin not, persuaded me to just kind of come up and play for the choir and try it out.
yeah. That's an
So,
awesome skill set. I'm so glad. I mean, obviously, not glad you had to get it through church, but I'm glad you got it because I mean, you can obviously use your skills and talents as you do, to impact the world now in a different way. But that's very cool. I know sometimes when we're in church, the theology kind of goes over our heads as kids.
mhm.
But for what you remember and what you remember the preachers saying and the revival guys, well, all the different aspects of the messaging that gets through, what do you remember as some of the core things that they were telling you about God and the Bible?
I guess some of the biggest things is just not to sin. There were some I would say there were some pretty strict things because of the church that I was raised in, just their teachings that they had. Eat things like going to bowling alleys and chewing gum in church and even wearing jewelry and all of these things they kind of said were like sin to a degree. I mean, they were
Well,
called teachings, but they kind of treated them like sins, I'll put it that way.
yeah,
Um, and so it was a lot of strict stuff. It's mainly just not being able to do certain things like listening to secular music or playing secular music or just going certain places. But again, because I was a kid and I was around a lot of family, I was in a bubble. And like I said, I was raised in the country, so there wasn't really a lot to get into all the time. So a lot of times we had to just be creative, like making up songs or just playing the keyboard or just like I said, being creative with what was in our environment. So I can't say I always missed everything because I didn't really experience it
Yeah.
until later in life. But um, it
Well, were
was
they
just,
telling you like that you were a sinner and you had a sin problem?
well, no, not me. I mean, they usually won't do that to kids. So I mean, like if you're a kid, then they'll just tell you to, do right, or they'll try and maybe give you some scriptures or something. But
Well,
um,
that's amazing because that's very different from my background. They'll tell kids from the earliest days you are wicked, 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 and you're born in sin, and you got a horrific sin problem, and yeah, God's looking
wow.
in your heart and judging you. And even if you try to do good, if even the good you do is bad because you're doing it with the wrong motivation. So that's really cool that you sounds like may have escaped a little bit of that side of the religious trauma.
Yeah, at the beginning, yeah. I'm just saying as a kid. Now,
Right,
once
right,
I
right,
got older, and once I got older, that sounds familiar because it's just like, they expect you to know how to make, sound decisions and which is funny to say that, but good decisions based on what they taught you from childhood. I mean, I was basically indoctrinated. So when you're growing up with that as your foundation, I mean, you're pretty much aligned with it already. Like you go along with it because that was taught along with your morals, which you have to learn later on to separate. But that's it. It wasn't a big deal for me, and I mean, just to be honest, like in Christianity, I had a good life because I had family. I had my both of my parents. I made decent grades in school. Once I got older, I got I actually moved straight out of my parents' house into my own home, so I had my own home. Cars paid off. Um, Good reputation within the church, outside of the church. Um, I mean, everything was good for me. I got married. I mean, it's basically just living the life. I was working my own hours because I was self-employed. I mean, it was just I really didn't have anything to complain about, to be honest.
right,
And I was working in the music industry. I was starting to travel with national artists. Some of those artists were like the late Troy Sneed, the Georgia Mass Choir. They were in the movie The Preacher's Wife with Whitney Houston and Denzel Washington.
right,
I worked with the Clark Sisters and FAMU Gospel Choir. In fact, that was the first recording that I did on a national project. But I I couldn't complain about anything, to be honest. Life was good. I mean,
yeah,
that's basically the best way I can say it. Like while I was in it, because the bubble provided so much security as far as like socially, just in every aspect. I mean, there was something there that would kind of help you stay encouraged or motivated within that community.
yeah.
So
Can I
I
ask,
couldn't complain.
just to take us back a few steps, even though you did, not hear some of those messages that I mentioned when you were young, what was it like just straight up your relationship with Jesus? Did you and God, did you feel like you were like he was your special friend, or at least he was like a father figure in heaven? Did you pray to him and feel like you were close to him? Did you feel like, you could kind of rely on him to get you through hard times? Or if there was even when you were a little kid, like there's a thunderstorm and it's, the middle of the night. So, like you're kind of stuck on your own, but it's like, it's just kind of scary rattle in the house, but it's okay. I can pray to God. God, I know you're there. You'll walk with me through the valley of the shadow of death and all that. Did that kind of stuff come in early, or like when did you start to think of Jesus first as like an actual live presence in your life, talking to you and guiding you?
Well, I guess this will be more of an interesting part for me. As very devout as I was, I'd say, um, I I never felt like an actual connection in that sense where like some people say, God talks to them or Jesus speaks to them. I never felt that. I was just very devout to the belief. And even though I didn't experience anything like that, I still was very determined and motivated to be true to that or stay true to that because it's all I knew. Like I didn't know anything about any other religions or not even not believing at all. It's just that's all I knew literally. So I was just kind of like, well, this has got to be it. So I got to make it work. So it's just like this is it. And then even once I got into like middle school and high school, um, I was still very devout. I mean, I would basically uphold the teachings that I was taught, and kind of I guess I would kind of look down on people if they weren't going to church on Sundays or doing things I didn't do, like drinking or smoking or cussing, all that kind of stuff. Like it I I mean, I just thought that was normal. Like I thought that, we believe in God and everybody should believe in God, and this is the way life is supposed to be. Like, if you're not believing in God, what's wrong with you? Like, what I mean, that's how I was taught, and so that's what I was
Yeah.
holding on to, and I didn't really think about it much. That's the thing. Is like I was just kind of doing what I was taught, but I wasn't really thinking about it per se. Just thinking about the effects that what I'm saying and what I'm upholding will really have on other people because it was all I was around. So,
Mm.
like I said, I was in a big bubble. I was in a
Almost like it
big
was just like the default of, if you don't know any other options, you go with the one that's the one that's there, but also that's completely around you with everybody else. And if you, like
exactly.
you said, if you don't have other people living a different way, or if there are any, slight divergences, they're kind of looked down on. It's like it's easy to fall into place, especially if you get a lot of praise, which so many of us kids did. Like, hey, you did the right thing, yay! Congratulations for obeying the Lord.
All right.
Can I just ask, just to clarify, it does sound like when you say you were you were really committed to this,
Hmm.
and this was a big deal to you in one sense. For a lot of us, that that kind of phraseology evokes the sense of like, I was in a tight relationship with God. It sounds like yours may have been a little bit different, and I'm not quite sure how to ask it, but would you say that it was more about living a moral life and living the way, like the Ten Commandments, the Sermon on the Mount? Was it more about just obeying God, or did you like, was there a point at which you felt like this switched from like a rule-based thing, even if you were good at obeying the rules? Not that rule-based is always hard for everybody. Some people are in rule-based systems and they do just fine, but where it switched from like rule-based and performance based to just faith. Like, I have faith in Jesus as my savior. He died for me. He rescued me from the problem that I had, the distance that I had between God and myself. Jesus was the bridge. He is the hero of my life. And we're close in some level, even if it wasn't like I hear him talking to me. It's still a lot less about what I do. And if I hit all the rules right, and more about I just place my life, as it were, in God's hands through Jesus. Did that evolve for you in that level, or was it more about the morality?
A little bit, and that gets into something that I guess I had to think about really hard because when I was in it, and because I was around so many people that felt the same way I do, um, I actually started to feel that there was something wrong with me because I grew up in a holiness church, mainly predominantly black holiness church. So there was a lot of everything going on. I mean, a lot of speaking in tongues, a lot of hooping and hollering, a lot of loud music, a lot of faith healing, a lot of prophecy, like all the stuff you hear about, like in a lot of churches that might be extra. I was kind of in one of those churches, so for me to be in that environment, my family now, and not really be one of those people that were speaking in tongues, shouting, just feeling the spirit like come down on me in some supernatural way. I started feeling that there was something wrong with me. I was literally like feeling that I started blaming myself. I was like, okay, God, what is that one sin in my life that I haven't gotten rid of that's keeping you from communing with me the way I feel I'm supposed to be communing with you? And literally a big portion of my life was spent like that. So I spent a lot of my time actually feeling bad and feeling that I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough for his presence or just to experience anything from God. But I was still very devout in the sense where this has got to be the right way. It's just something I'm doing wrong, and I'm going to keep trying. I'm just going to keep doing this. I mean, I'm going to put my faith and trust in this because this not only is not all it's all I know, but it's just this has got to work. I mean, I see it working for other people, or at least I thought I see it working for other people, but I see this person speaking in tongues. I see this person shouting. I see this person feeling the spirit. I see good things happening for this person in life, and they attribute it to God. I just have to be doing something wrong. That's the only logical explanation at that time. And I was just like, I must be doing something wrong. So, um, I I I would say I got closer to a point like that the older I got, probably more or less in my late teens, because I was really trying to go at it hard, like really trying to seek God and really kind of really dive into it like a lot harder, get more involved in reading my Bible and Bible study and just being involved in the right environments as far as like places where I could maybe experience the presence of God. So I was really trying to, stay in that environment. So maybe something rubbed off on me or something, But I mean, honestly, I say I was really going at it hard, and I was trying my best to uphold what I was taught. I can't truthfully say that I had like any type of supernatural experiences, but I really, really, really wanted them. Like I mean, I really, really, really wanted to speak in tongues. I really, really wanted to feel God just move on me in some way, some shape or form that I didn't have to question. And so that's why I
Mm,
felt there was something wrong with me because I outwardly, me looking at other people, I'm thinking that they are experiencing exactly what I want to experience.
that's
But
interesting.
that's all I could do is just try to keep pushing in and getting closer to God, and that's what I did for a good portion of my life.
It's so much pressure too to feel like what, like you said, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? I didn't have that myself earlier in life, but I did have one conversation, and I've mentioned it a couple times in different interviews over the years. I'll just mention it in passing here, but I grew up in an environment where people typically said God speaks to you through the Bible. So like you don't get a message and you don't get a message, you don't get a message. We all get one message from God, and it's the Bible. And so it kind of keeps you from being off the rails where you might be like, um, oh, God told me that, our church is supposed to paint the walls blue, and get someone else like, no, God spoke to me. It's supposed to be green. Like, no, we're not, that's not, God's not speaking to you and you and you. He's speaking to all of us through the word of God. But of course, you do have, a lot of variations in Christianity where they take that very differently and say, no, God does speak to you. And sometimes he speaks to you very, very directly. And I had an elder in my church when I was doing a pastoral internship for a year. I spent most of my time with the pastor, but this one elder who was much more of he was as close to like Pentecostals you could get without being Pentecostal, but still in our
Right.
camp. But we were chatting one night after a Wednesday night prayer meeting, just he and I, we both had keys to the church. We just grabbed some chairs in the kind of the quietness of the evening and started talking about the internship and this and that. How's life going? What's your walk with Christ like? And he gets real serious. Like you just tell he's like kind of deep, the spirits move, and he's like, so what is God saying to you, Tim?
Hmm.
As a pastoral candidate, you're wanting to be a pastor. What's God saying to you? And I reflected because I'm from this background, like God's not speaking to me, he's speaking to us through the Bible.
Hmm.
And we kind of went back and forth to banter, like try to figure out what exactly he meant. Maybe I was misinterpreting the question. And
Right.
eventually it was clear, like, he meant, what is God specifically saying to you that he's not saying
Hmm.
to anybody else? And I was admitting, I was like, I don't think I've ever had such an experience where I feel like God's speaking to me, but not anyone else. And he's like, wait, you want to be a pastor of a church and God's not speaking to you? Like, and I was like, oh shit, like maybe I'm doing something really wrong here. Because yeah, I
Hmm.
do want to be a pastor, but no, God's not speaking to me. I mean, I know the word of God, I know the Bible, but I don't know like a voice or a direction in my head. And
Right.
it's really it puts you in that hamster wheel of like, am I doing something wrong? Am I not? And you feel like you're going ping ponging back and forth between what is your relationship with God? Good enough? How good is good enough? How close is good enough? And why aren't I, so to speak, a rock star for God? And I didn't ever want to be like a rock star in the sense of like being up on stage and everyone knew me, but I do
Yeah.
want to be like, if people could theoretically see my heart of hearts, and God who could see my
Right.
heart of hearts, I wanted him to look at me and say, that man is sold out for Christ. That man wants to turn the world upside down for Jesus. That man lives, it's like he sees the kingdom around him. He sees the angels and he lives that way, even though he doesn't yet see the kingdom, he doesn't yet see the angels. That was my heart. And it just is like, it's weird to be in that where background where you're like, I love this stuff. I love Jesus, but maybe I'm still not enough. And did you feel like you could ever, like, did you ever get to a point where you're able to rest in your walk with Christ and salvation, where you were just like, I've, for lack of a better term, arrived?
Well, I think I more or less accepted where I was. Like, I got to a point where I was just like, well, maybe I'm just not the type of Christian that's going to be like speaking in tongues. I'm not the type of Christian that's going to have all these spiritual experiences. I mean, I just accepted that I'll probably have the Holy Ghost, and it'll just be something that's in me that just doesn't display out outwardly or so. Um, but I kind of just left it there, I say, because I was, I mean, this kind of gets more towards the me coming out, but I kind of just left it there because that's all I could do. Like I've tried. I mean, that, this is gonna be funny, but like, there's a song by Donnie McClurkin that says, "After you've done all you can, you just stand." That's kind of what I did. Like, you prayed and cried, prayed and cried. I mean, that's the type of stuff that I was doing. I mean, seeking God, nothing, just nothing. So okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna stand on what I was taught. That's kind of where I had to leave it, and yeah, that's all I could do.
Mm. So what were some of the early seeds that came about in your life that made you start to question the worldview, besides obviously just the sense of not feeling as close to God as you expected to, but in terms of the actual truth claims of Christianity, what were some of the early seeds that developed?
Uh, well, I'd say just throughout what I was doing, like as far as like working in churches and the music business, I saw people doing certain things that just didn't line up with what I was trying to live. I mean, they just kind of be doing their own thing. Didn't line up with the Bible. I mean, just there's a whole bunch of different things. I say that these are small seeds. Stuff like that didn't actually deter me from actually believing or trying to believe. But those are kind of like the beginnings. But then I just had my own personal questions that I was kind of always taught to push to the back of my brain. Like, you kind of just don't question God. But I always had questions about things. And I think my brain was getting full. So I just I started dealing with cognitive dissonance. Like certain things just didn't make sense to me, but I was just taught to kind of go along with it. And when you're in an environment where you're getting, I guess, the word pounded into your head every week, sometimes multiple times a week, it's like you don't really have time to think about it. You kind of go along with it. You're like, yeah, I do have questions about that. But then they bring another word and then they pound it in your head, and then you're trying to memorize that and trying to apply that to your life. And it's an ongoing thing where it's kind of like it's just how the belief system works. I mean, if you keep pounding something into somebody's head at week after week, I mean, they're not going to have time to really think about it. So I think I got caught
Yeah.
up in that. But
Like you're on
um,
cruise control or something?
yeah, but I mean, the
Mm.
questions that really started piling up in the back of my mind were like one of the things that just really kind of started pushing me back the other way.
Yeah. It's interesting that how you mentioned seeing people's lives. Um, I feel like that's something that I agree. Like it's you're kind of taught like that's just because people are going to disappoint you and even hurt you. That has nothing to do with God. People can be awful, and that doesn't mean God's awful or God is inconsistent. But there
Right.
is still that sense on some level of like if you know that there's people that are in the church you're sitting next to you all the time, you see them, they're under the same messaging. Like then there should be fruit of the spirit there, and maybe that person is cantankerous or rude or nasty or whatever. They're just their life is ugly, and you're like if God is in you, he's going to make you beautiful and attractive, not just in the sense of just because you're getting the fruit of that spirit, but also because God wants to prune you, take away your sin and your rough edges. He also wants to make you usable so he can use you to, bring other people to him. And when you see that too much, you're like, you've been exposed to the gospel an awful lot. And you still look like the world. You still look really cranky and nasty. And I remember one of the things the questions that came up to me a lot in Bible college was in terms of pastoral ministry was they would say older men older men who are mature wiser godly men in the church are looking for young men to mentor to raise up the next generation. And so they were kind of emphasizing for the older men to say where's your team, where's your guys that you're raising up. And then for the younger guys like myself at the time saying who are you looking to, who are you trying to mimic. And I remember distinctly at one point in the pretty large church of 300 or 400 people, a lot of men thinking, I don't know that I want to actually be like any of these guys. They just kind of look cranky and like just like kind of tired old white men that just want to kind of come in and do their thing and say their word and put the money in the plate and then go home. And like it's like you look kind of boring to me. You don't look like you're even really alive that much. And that really shook me up in hopefully a similar level to what you're talking about, where just like I look at your lives and it just doesn't add up. And especially when you're like you're have the fervor, you're like I want to turn the world upside down, and you all just want to watch football, and it's like come on, the world's burning, people are going to hell, let's transform it, let's get a mission a yard from the gates of hell, let's rescue the people that are perishing, and people are like let's talk about football. I'm like, come on, you're not on fire for God. But that does get you eventually like I don't want to be like you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was raised in a church where they really kind of harped on the personal relationship. And so that's what I spent a lot of time trying to get, a personal relationship. And that I think that's why it bothered me so much. It's like I never felt like I had a personal relationship. It was always somebody saying the Bible says this, or a prophet saying this about me, or somebody saying that I need to do this more in order to hear from God. Or it was just everything but an actual conversation with God or actual commune with God. And I was just like, I can't, something's not working here. Like it's just like on all sides, it's just not working. And I'm really trying to make it work, but it's just this is not making sense. Like I got to a point where I don't know, I was just tired. Like I mean, and when I say tired, I mean like really like my soul was tired because I was trying so hard to push into God and just getting nothing. And I mean like I said, this goes more towards the end of my days in Christianity, but I literally, like, my last prayer was just like, God, I need you to reveal yourself to me in a way that I can comprehend, which is a very personal prayer, and it means something different for anybody that will pray it. But, for me, I didn't have a specific thing I was looking for, but it was more or less just, okay, God, you know me, you know what it will take to get me to believe or have confidence in my belief or whatever. I just need something. Like I need something to convince me because I'm feeling like I'm not really convinced right now. I'm feeling a lot of doubt and I'm not really getting a lot of reassurance from you. So I need something. I really need, and not want, but I need something if I'm going to keep going down this path of Christianity because I've centered my whole entire being around, belief in you. So now, I mean, the least you can do is just kind of like show me that you're there. I mean, me, not everybody else. Show me that you're there because I need to feel that. I need that connection. It's like being in a relationship with somebody through their messages in a book. You can read what they've said and that's great. I mean, some of it might be flattering, some of it might make you feel good, but when it's time to actually experience that person, if you can't experience them, it's going to start to fade because it's just like, how do I know it's even, this person writing this stuff? Maybe it's somebody, maybe it's AI, maybe it's just there's so many things that can go wrong with not actually having an actual relationship with somebody in a way that you can comprehend, like in person. Like I mean, I try to explain it to people. It's just like that's the main thing that kind of made me fall apart. Like I didn't feel anything. I couldn't, after all those years of dedicating my life to try to, be the best Christian I can be, to be um just the best version of me that I could be, well, that I thought would be of me in Christianity. It's just nothing. And I was literally like praying that prayer, like, God, I need you to reveal yourself to me in a way that I can comprehend, along with reading my Bible intensely and trying to get more involved in Bible studies, reading books outside of the Bible to try and get a better understanding of what I might be doing wrong. Still blaming myself, but fasting, praying, all of that stuff I was doing. And I eventually just kind of got to a point where I was getting headaches, getting sick, frustrated. I mean, the one thing that was supposed to be bringing me the most joy in life was just tearing me apart, just killing me on the inside. And I just didn't know what to do. I mean, like there would be times where I was up late at night, because I couldn't sleep. I would come in my studio and pray and seek God and just be crying about this whole topic because I just couldn't get anything out of it from what I was doing, and I didn't know what to do. So I got to a point where I just kept hitting a brick wall, and so that prayer became my last prayer. Like just, God, reveal yourself to me in a way that I can comprehend. Um, Otherwise, I don't, you know my number, you know where to find me because I don't know if I can keep doing this. And slowly but surely, I backed away from things like praying over my food or just going to church at all. Just anything that was religious, I just stopped doing to see if anything was going to change. And nothing happened. Like, absolutely nothing happened. Like my life didn't get worse. There were no curses that were put on me. Nothing. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna take another step back. So I mean, I started telling people I'm agnostic, so it's just like, okay, well, people kind of didn't know what that was like in my community. They kind of thought it was like another religion. But that was just like my way of saying, okay, I I believe there might be a God, but I'm not convinced of this God, like the Christian God. And I'm just any religion right now. I'm just not really convinced of it. So I identify as agnostic. I just say there could be, but I don't know. I don't have the information to kind of prove that. So I went through all of that, and still no lightning striking me down for questioning God. It's just the more I backed away, it's just like the more nothing was happening. So I got to a point where it's just like, really, God, I mean, you're not even trying. So I mean, if you're not trying, I guess we're just breaking up. Because I mean, there's no way that this can be a one-sided relationship. So I just completely let go. I mean, told my wife, we had our conversation about it, told my parents. Of course, they weren't happy, but um, I just had to find a way to be who I really am. Like I saw that I'd been trying to be somebody else for so long. Like it just wasn't working for me from the beginning, and I didn't realize that there were other options. And so when I got to a point when I was digging in so hard to the point where I'm getting headaches, I'm getting stressed, crying. I mean, I just had to let go because I had gone as far as I could go. Like I mean, there was nobody that could tell me that I didn't try. Like because my whole life was dedicated, and I'm talking about my career, my social life, my everything. Like was dedicated to the belief in God and just trying to be a good servant. But it didn't work, and I mean, like that. It's hard to go from that to saying, everything I just built up, I need to walk away from so I can find my identity. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do in my life because it's just like, who am I? Like for 3 years, I was kind of like in limbo because I was trying to make it work. You come out of something that you were born into, and you feel the cold because you're now outside of that big bubble. You used to be at the top of inside the bubble, but now you're at the bottom outside, and you see how you get treated by people that are inside, and it's like a very humbling experience. And now it's just like, man, who? Wow. I mean, you see what you used to be, and you're like very sorry, and you want to apologize to like everybody, but I just 3 years, I didn't know who I was. I mean, I was trying to see if there was a way that I can integrate back into the fellowship, the community, without actually having to be a part of it. But ultimately, it just didn't work. I mean, you just can't be in that without believing in it, or at least claiming that you believe in it, because it won't work. So that was a
Mm.
very, very hard cookie to swallow. And
Were were you married at that point when you were deconverting?
yeah, almost I'd say 3 years into our marriage is when I realized that I really don't believe. Um,
What were those
I-
conversations like with your wife?
well, I mean, fortunately, my wife grew up in a better environment than I did. Um, she was raised around people that were atheist, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist. She had more of a diverse upbringing than I did. I was just raised in, my one little church environment, and we visited other churches sometimes, but that was mainly, my experiences and Christianity. So when I told her that, I don't I don't believe in God anymore. Like, and I was still kind of like questioning because it's like weird saying it, because that my whole life is just like, of course I believe in God, like nobody can tell me I don't believe. But then for it to come out my mouth, it was just, it was weird, and it made sense. I mean, it's not like I wanted to deny it, but it was just like I had to get used to this because I just came from out of like 20 something plus years of being a Christian and like being an advocate for Christianity, Jesus, God, and everything that comes along with it, to saying I don't want anything to do with that anymore. So our conversation wasn't really bad or anything. I mean, I actually gave her the option to leave me because I was technically the one that was changing in our relationship, but she didn't feel it was a deal breaker, which kind of caught me off guard because I know had it been the other way around, I'd probably been like, we can't be together anymore. That's how
Mm,
like devout and how into it I was. But um yeah, we ended up staying together, and
that's
we
awesome.
still have some things that we have some bumps in the road because she's not she's not atheist. She's more or less, I guess, spiritual but not religious. Um, she probably wouldn't necessarily identify exactly as a traditional Christian, but she still believes like in a higher power and things like that. But I mean, we see eye to eye in several areas. about certain things because there's just a lot of things about the church that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And we can have good conversations about that and talk about it. I mean, we don't always agree on everything, but I mean, it's we've been able to get through things. I'll put it that way.
Mm. That's awesome. That's the ideal. That's the hope. That's great, great news.
Right.
And I was just going to comment too. I totally relate to the idea of the weirdness of when you finally admit to yourself that you just don't believe anymore. I love that illustration from The Matrix where Neo is first pulled out of the Matrix itself, and his body is kind of just looks like almost like he's dead.
Hmm.
And a few minutes, they're showing these different scenes where they're kind of repairing his body with the needles and so forth. They're trying to get him back to where he can actually use his body because he's basically been like in a pod of goo his whole life from
Hmm.
birth to adulthood. And he says, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And Morpheus responds, "You've never used them before." And I love that illustration. It's so clear because it's like, yeah, like that's the reality of it. We have never used our eyes before. And even when you're confident, you're like, yeah, there's no way this is anything but mythology. And I'm sure of that. It's still weird because you're just like, I've had this presence in my mind, in my heart for all these years of God is there. And everything is like, I'm going to pursue this in life. God, what do you want me to do? And
Right.
oh, this might be sin. It might not. God, is this sin? Should I avoid this?
Right.
Everything is. It's like he's like your right hand man, as it were. Not to be disrespectful. Back, I would have been disrespectful back then, but um,
Mhm.
like he's right there in your head. He's right there in your mindset, and all of a sudden it's like he's gone. It's
Yeah.
almost kind of like if you had Santa Claus and you could theoretically keep believing in Santa until you're 30,
Hmm.
and like every year that you go on, your faith gets bigger and deeper. Like, I know Santa's real. I have seen him do amazing things. I know it's not my parents putting those presents under the tree. I am sure that I'm sure that I'm sure that is Santa Claus and he's real. And then to finally be like, holy smokes, like he's actually not real. It's just, it blows your mind. It blows your mind. And even something saying something as simple as like, I've been speaking to the ceiling and to the drywall this whole time. That's all I've been doing is and speaking to myself. This has
Yeah.
been self-talk. To admit that to yourself, it's just it's mind-boggling. It's weird, and I definitely get that. So I appreciate you bringing that part of it into it. Can I ask when you got to that point though, where you're fully embracing this weird journey, and you're saying, I just don't think this is reality. Um, what was it like dealing with some of the theological and worldview implications, such as uh, you may not have an afterlife. You may not see loved ones who've already passed. Your purpose is all of a sudden very different. It's not dictated by the Bible or Yahweh. Your morality is obviously different. How did you start to process some of those deeper questions and even some of the surfacey ones like, I heard evolution's bullshit and Earth is 6,000 years old. Maybe we actually are like, you know, billions and billions of years old. Just a lot of ramifications scientifically and theologically and worldview wise. What were some of the big ones that you had to process that really kind of messed with you for a while?
Well, I say the afterlife thing. I mean, there's so many things that I just have to take as they come because there's so much information that you have to just unpack, and sometimes you just don't experience it all at once. You just have to kind of like as it comes to you, like, oh, okay, and then you just kind of like process it and think about how you really feel about it now. I've had a lot of that, but I'd say like afterlife stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I think part of Christianity is, and this is like a buddy of mine. We used to always say this. Christianity can be summed up in basically one phrase: accept Jesus or burn. I mean, it doesn't matter how nice you try to make it seem, like how nice Jesus is, how nice God is. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Like that's what the book is about. So, I think fear is just it's just in every Christian's heart. Like it's there because you're wanting to have this nice eternal life in heaven and not a damned life in hell forever. And so I don't even think people think about that by itself a lot of times because it's just like, do you really want to be up in heaven just worshiping God all day and doing the same thing forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and I mean, it's just like, did you really think about that? Or I mean, but yeah, but I mean, I guess the whole thing about hell, they think it's so much worse and they just don't want to be there forever. But just that fear, um, removing that fear was a big part of me being able to cross the barrier. Because once you're not fearing, living eternally in hell or having a reward of heaven forever, now it's just like, oh, well, what do I think? I mean, I really don't. Honestly, I just see this as the only life that we live. I mean, what happens after we die, nobody knows because nobody's been there and came back and brought some pictures. So, I mean, we just don't know. So, I mean, it's not something that I fear about anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to die. I mean, because how we die is probably the scary part. But what happens after we die? I mean, it's just a one-way trip for everybody. And, if we find out that there is something, cool, fine. I mean, if not, cool, fine. I mean, it's like it's not worth devoting your whole life to a speculation about what can happen after we die. And that's, I mean, so many people think that focusing on your afterlife is more important than living this one life that we do know about. And I'm just like, wow. Once I really got that revelation, it's just like, wow. Um, no, that doesn't even matter. And I see so many people focusing on it now, and I think that was a big thing that just really helped me get over the barrier. But after getting through that, it's just like everything else, like just things like marriage. My church used to not believe in getting married and then getting divorced. If you got divorced, you just have to stay single for the rest of your life. That's what they were teaching. But then outside of that, it's just like, even stuff like monogamous relationships. I was raised in a very, very devout church, so it was nothing but monogamous. But then after just getting out of the belief and then speaking with people that live in that lifestyle, like E&M, it's just like, oh, well, that makes sense too. So why did it's just like you start understanding. I mean, to me, I was very closed-minded, very arrogant, very a lot of bad things. But in the church, I was not considered any of those things. It's just once I got out, I saw exactly why I would be considered those things by everybody else. Because I myself I used to be homophobic, which is really bad, and I wish I could just go back to everybody that I spoke bad of, made jokes about, that was an LGBTQ plus. Because it's like now me coming out as atheist is like the same thing as coming out as gay. It's like it's hard. Like you have to hide in the closet until you feel safe to come out. And it's like that I saw so many correlations between the two, and it was just like, dang, it's just my mind is being blown by like how much stuff I was just so ignorant to. And it that's why I say I have to take things like as they come because like I'm not always thinking about everything, but there's just so many different things in life. Just how I look at other religions or how I look at other people that weren't raised in Christianity. It's how I used to look at other atheists. It's just like, wow, I was really arrogant, bigoted. It's just and you just, oh my goodness, you just feel bad. And there's nothing you can really do about it. And for me, because it was such a big part of my life, it's like people still to this day don't know that I'm atheist. Like I still have to tell people, I still have to go through that process of sharing with people that I don't believe anymore. And they're talking to me like about all these things that, they might be scared of in their religion or the things that might trouble them or make them feel like they're a sinner or whatever. And I'm like, no, I mean like people smoking, drinking, cussing. Who cares? I mean, it's like I don't see those as wrong anymore. I don't really see sin anymore. I just see like things that might be wrong or right or our preferences. But my whole outlook on life just completely changed and it's still evolving. I mean, I'm still learning things and that's the great thing about it. I mean, being outside of it and just having time to think about things made a big difference. Like if I was still in church, I don't know if I'd have gotten to this point yet, but I think the pull was there for me to like come out of it because, like I said, I had all those questions that the right moment was just waiting to happen. And so, I was actually, I'm gonna go back a little bit. I was actually at a church with my wife. We were like ministers of music there, and we had just resigned. Um, so we were taking a break, and that's actually when my 3 years of limbo started because I wasn't in church every day, every week anymore. Like we used to go there for like Sunday morning for two services, then we would go for like weekend, no, sorry, weekday rehearsals and Bible study. We were at the church at least 3 to 4 days out of the week. So it was just being pushed into our heads. But once we left that, my mind just had time to think. My brain was just like, okay, vacation. Let's just, decompress. And then my mind started wandering outside of church, and things just kind of started making sense outside of church. And I was like wondering why, okay, why, well, and then, like I said, it was just a big battle between my heart and my mind. And 3 years later, my mind won. And fortunately for me, I landed on my feet because some people I know it's hard. Like I wouldn't wish like a self honesty experience like mine on anybody else because you just don't know like where who you are. You don't know where you're gonna land. You don't know how to feel. You don't know what to think. It was very, very hard. Like, and I think a lot of people that see me, saying that I'm a non-believer now, they don't understand that that was a big struggle for me to just like embrace who I am, not who they want me to be or who the world wants me to be. But I was, like I said, I had a good life. So for me to walk away from that, I would hope they can see that there had to be a very valid reason for me to just leave all of that behind. But sometimes people just don't get it, and I'm learning that people just don't get it sometimes. And
Mm.
it's still hard, and I'm still dealing with some of that because I didn't have an experience that the reason for me leaving the church wasn't necessarily, like I said, people doing things that made me upset or me getting church hurt per se. It was just my personal experience that didn't happen that kind of, I guess to a degree that did kind of traumatize me because I saw it all around me, but I never experienced it. So it's weird when people think, oh, we're just dealing with church hurt, or I know there are bad people in the church that do stuff that make you want to just leave. I'm like, no, that wasn't it. It was just God. Like God didn't make himself present in my life. So it just didn't make any sense. So I left. And it's really that simple. But sometimes people
Mm.
just don't believe me when I say that. They think I went through this extremely horrible, traumatic situation where I don't know, anything bad that could have happened to me, and it's just no, I had a good life,
Did
but
you ever
things
get the
just weren't
sense
making
of
sense.
like people saying you were just in the wrong church, under the wrong pastor, the wrong teaching, or like if you come to my church, we'll sort it out for you, that kind of stuff?
I still get that. I mean, to be honest, because I mean, I consider myself to be genuinely an atheist, like agnostic atheist. I say agnostic atheist, and some people might have different views, but I say agnostic because that deals more with knowledge to me. So I don't know if there is or isn't a God. I don't think there's enough evidence either way to prove there is or isn't a God. But when it comes to beliefs, I'm atheist because I'm not convinced that there is a God. So I try to explain that to people,
Right.
but sometimes I get, back and forth. But it's just like, okay, well, I'm just atheist if that'll make you feel better. But I still have people that try to say, man, if you'd have just went to my church or if you just been in my environment, you probably still be serving God right now. I'm like, no, I don't think so because it's just like the way my brain was, I was really going as hard as I can go at it. And so if I hit the same brick wall at your church or in your environment, I can't see myself going anywhere else because this was a deeply personal thing. This didn't have anything to do with the Bible. This didn't have anything to do with how you're living your life. No person could convince me that God was real. That I got to a point where I needed God to convince me that God was real. And so when it gets to that point, I mean, how are you going to change anything? Like I don't you can live your life. I mean, do what makes you feel good or do what you feel is right for you. But I can't copy your life and expect to see the same results. I'm not you. So I mean, again, people still try to say things like that, and honestly, it can be a little annoying. But I try to be a nice person, and I think that's why a lot of people still don't know that I'm atheist because I've never been a contentious person. I've always tried to be that person that can be a bridge between two islands
Yeah.
because I see a lot of people that are very, very devout and very, very on fire for God. But then I also see a lot of atheists that are like very, very militant and don't want to have anything to do with it. And I'm kind of like in the middle. Like, I really don't want to have anything to do with religion, but I also don't want to just throw away the people. I want to see if there's like a happy medium that we can come to and kind of learn how to communicate with each other without getting upset or mad or whatever all the time and then just completely writing each other off. Now, with that being said, it does seem to be a hard issue when it comes from the Christian side because so many different things just get forced on you. And me as like an atheist, like I don't try to force my beliefs on anybody. I just share my experience that led me to my current beliefs. And that's it. I don't try to say you need to be atheist. And I'm like, no, this is just my path. You know, if your path leads you to a place of Christianity or to be a Buddhist, anything, like if that works for you, walk in your honesty. I'm just walking in my honesty. So
Mhm.
that's what I preach, if anything. I'm just like, be honest with yourself, like walk in your truth. Like if you're not being you, who are you? That's all I can ask. Like, just be you. Try to be honest with yourself. But that being honest is very hard with yourself. Like when it comes to self honesty, oh my goodness. Like the first time I really, um, the first time I really experienced self honesty, it was as weird as me saying I don't believe in God because I'm asking myself questions like, do you really believe in God? And there's nobody to judge me. It's just me. And I'm like really having to answer that question internally. And it's just like, No, I don't. Wow. Okay. So why are you doing that? So I mean, it's just like you start asking yourself all these questions, and it's just you start taking more of a rational thought process. And it just happened so that my mind won this battle because my heart was really there with Christianity. Like that's I feel everything that goes along with that environment, but it doesn't make sense. It literally doesn't make sense for so many different reasons. But just on a personal level for me, it's just because I couldn't have like a connection with this God. That's why I had to leave. It's just it didn't make any kind of sense. So it changed how I viewed everything. Everything. Like I there's just so much. It changed how I wanted to raise my kids. Changed how I wanted to live my life. It changed like what I wanted to do with my life. It changed how I saw people. Um,
Mm.
it's just so much. And I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, but
No, it's
it was a
great.
loaded
I love
question.
hearing your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
I
go
was
ahead.
going to add, it's interesting too when you realize that the Christians really don't have a scope for the imagination of just imagining that maybe they're wrong. Because of course, there's like we know that we know that we know that we're right, and sometimes I reflected as I was deconverting on the questions of like, well, what if like you'd never heard of Christianity and then you heard about it for the first time when you're 30?
Right,
How would it like you'd never seen this stuff? You'd never seen communion, you never seen a church, and maybe you grew up in a complete different environment and everything was Buddhism, whatever, everything was some other religion, and then you get exposed for the first time to Christianity, like really exposed to it, and you're like, okay, there's some worldview claims here. How do I sort through if they're true or not?
right,
Or if you maybe knew about it, but you just had no sheltering where you were like, yeah, I know what Christianity is, but it's never been shoved down my throat. But now for the first time as a 30-year-old, I'm going to actually think about it, reflect on it. Is there anything here? But because so many of us grew up where we're sheltered and you can't ask those questions for real, you kind of have to check your brain at the door. It's really hard to do that openness and honesty that you're talking about. And it gets almost weird because you realize too, it's weird because you feel yourself shifting, but you realize the people around you that you love and care about, you have to kind of admit, I don't think that they've ever done it. And I don't know that some of them are capable of doing it. I think for some of them, it would just be too much. And you realize very quickly you're on your own path. Like you are flying solo here. And obviously they could, be upset at you and even shun you. But even if they're, nice to you on the surface, in their heart of hearts, they're thinking, man, Tim just shipwrecked his life. I mean, that's just such a shame. Andre is just he's walking away from the light. He
right,
he wants to sin, or he's making such poor choices where the devil's got him. And you realize that's their only way to interpret this. They cannot say to themselves, I just simply might be wrong. And also
right,
I love the way you're talking about, agnosticism is a big piece of this to say, I'm not saying that there's necessarily no God. I'm just saying I want to go where the evidence leads, and right now it doesn't lead there. But I think it's helpful for me to at least say the evidence does lead to the point of saying, I don't think Yahweh is it. If there is a God, it's not Yahweh. That's definitely
right,
not. That's off the table. And of course, that's going to be very upsetting to the Christians. It's like, no, that's the direction, that's the conclusion you must come to is Yahweh is the real God, not just
right.
there is a God, but this is the real one, and he has a son named Jesus. But yeah, it's such a interesting game, and you feel bad too for the people around you because you realize as you reflect on yourself, like I could have gone to my deathbed, like you say you had those feelings about, how I feel close to God. Maybe all these questions would have never come. And maybe they wouldn't have actually been you feeling close to God. Maybe it was just if you had a different personality related to different chemicals in your brain when you were formed. But it's
Right.
like if you had a different personality, maybe you would have felt that artificial closeness to God and you would have never gone here. And you can realize I could have gone to my deathbed thinking this was all real. Well, if that's true of me, that's true of my family and friends too. They could go to their deathbed thinking it's real, and it gets very lonely very quickly, and it's a hard journey for a lot of people. It really is. And people lose marriages, people lose friends over it, and I'm just,
No,
yeah, I hear you.
I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, like, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, like everything, like as far as family, I do think about that. Like, I often wonder, like, have y'all really thought about this? Like, have y'all really put your beliefs aside and just looked at what you say you're believing in and just see how much sense it makes? Like, I don't think they have. I think they're scared to, for the reasons that I was saying, accept Jesus is burn. Um, that fear will prevent people from thinking. Like it's almost like their minds are being policed, so they can't really fully utilize their thoughts to come to certain conclusions. And it's hard seeing people do that because I'll see them in situations where there might be somebody that's sick or somebody that just passed, and they're just like, well, God must have wanted this, or this must be God's will, or they're in God's hands now. Or before that, they were praying like very firmly that God is going to heal them, and they're trusting and believing that God is a miracle worker. And it's just like from there to after they pass or something like that, there's a disconnect because it's just like, well, okay, so were you praying against God's will, or do you just not know what God wants? Because I mean, because you can't just do both. You can't do both. I mean, either you are really praying against God's will, or you're just lost. There's just no in between. Because once they say like, oh, it's just God's will, that means, oh, well, you're just saying that because the prayer didn't get answered. I mean, like and there's just a 50-50 chance when it comes to prayer. It's like it could happen or it could not happen. But then there's also a 50-50 chance that if you hope it happens, it can happen too. It's just like prayer, hope. I mean, same thing to some degree. So, but people will put more trust in prayer because socially it's more acceptable. I'll put it that way. But there's just
Yeah.
so many different things that are just wrong with everything I've seen. And I think people are really scared to dive into self-honesty because I would say it takes some bravery. It takes some bravery to look at yourself in the mirror without anybody else being there and coming to certain conclusions. Um, I used to tell people it's just like, the truth doesn't always look like what you think it'll look like. So when I came to my self honesty, like if you'd asked me 15 years ago whether I'd be atheist or not, I said definitely I'm Christian all the way, God all the way. 15 years later, I'm here. So I mean, it's just I think a lot of people just like you were saying, they're probably scared to go through that process, and it is a hard process to go through. I That's why I said earlier, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I think it's sometimes a necessary process to come to a more rational conclusion about things. Because if you just go with what you're taught, like I don't even know how I got out of it really. Like I was really deep in it. Like my whole family is religious. So for me to like, I think I might be the only atheist in the family at this point. I've had some other family members that have questioned some things, but they went right back. They still believe. And again, I don't have a problem with them believing, but the problem with me being the only atheist in the family is I don't really have anybody to relate to. And so when you're talking about family, like treating you nice on the surface is I've kind of experienced some of that, in certain places. Um, it's cool, they'll be cordial and stuff, but I can't really have those conversations with them uh, with the expectations of them really, I say, listening with an open mind. It's more or less they're listening, but we already know what they're gonna believe and say at the end of the story. So it's like,
Yeah.
I guess I'm to the point now where it's just like, how do we get along? How do we coexist together without feeling fake around each other or without feeling that we can't be ourselves around each other? I mean, that's kind of the point where I'm at right now because I feel it like even with people that, I used to consider friends, it's like it's not the same anymore. Like there's no the connection's not there anymore. And it's hard. Like they might think I'm bad or being rude for not contacting them or not reaching out to them all the time anymore. But I sometimes wonder if they understand how hard it is to be out of that environment and then still trying to interact with people in that environment, knowing that they feel a certain way. I mean, I mean, we can be nice to each other. I mean, we can have acquaintances and we work with people all the time that we're not necessarily buddy buddy or best friends with, but when it comes to, family or somebody that you want to be a close friend, um, you're probably going to want that core belief to be somewhere along the same lines or close to something that you believe so you don't like really have to struggle to talk about certain things because I like as an atheist, I can't talk to anybody that's really Christian about my atheist issues. They're not going to get it, especially if it's dealing with something where I don't want to talk about, certain things or I don't want to deal with certain things about Christianity. They might find that offensive. So it's like it becomes a struggle, and I don't think a lot of people understand that, which is probably one of the reasons that I try to be a bridge, because I know what it feels like to not have people to talk to. When I became atheist, I didn't really know any atheists. I think there might be one person I knew that my wife knew, and I just kind of vaguely knew him. But outside of that, I didn't really know any atheists. I was just like kind of like out in the deep by myself,
Yeah.
not knowing which way to swim. Just I didn't know where land was.
Mm.
So it was very hard. And for me to kind of like land on my feet after those 3 years, I mean, I consider myself fortunate because I can easily see how that could have just left me in limbo forever.
Yeah.
Because like I said, my upbringing was in Christianity. My morals was taught through Christianity, which makes it even that much more difficult because you have to learn how to separate morals from Christianity. It was a lot that I had to go through, and I said I'm still going through certain things to try to not necessarily deconvert, but to just like put my life back together. It's so much. It's
Mm.
just so much.
With the family thing too, I think one of the hard parts that just broke my heart so much is when you realize first about yourself, like that you were believing some really bad things, not just
Mhm.
that they were untrue, but they were really bad, that Christianity was bringing out the worst of you,
Yeah.
meaning you were defending and aligned with this God character who was saying, I want you to, in the Old Testament, commit genocide and land theft and slavery and child brides and stoning and misogyny and treat women like their property and just horrible stuff. And you just think, I was supposed to see that character as the most holy and loving character ever. He's the definition of love, as it were. And so you end up thinking, I'm of course going to defend this God because this is the truth and this is ultimate reality. This is the highest. If I could understand everything out there, I would see reality just like God. And God says, go kill them all. And take the young virgins for yourself and cut off the end of little boys' penises, because I want you to, to circumcise them and mutilate their genitals. And you're like, that must be the ultimate truth. And once you leave, you're like, not only is it a lot of it weird, but some of it's just like downright nasty, horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, why was I okay with this? Why was I okay with loving and singing worship songs to a God who was that psychopathic and narcissistic and egotistical? And yet I loved that character. But once you escape, you kind of, you're ashamed of yourself for being that person that was okay with that. But then you realize quickly everyone else around me is still okay with that. They're okay with a God who commanded all that stuff, and they might be okay with that forever. And a lot of them are just not going to deal with the issues, but some of them will. And arguably, I did, and I defended that God character in my mind. Like God has the right to slaughter anybody he wants to. The very fact that you have a breath to take right now is a gift from God, is a grace. He doesn't have to give you one more breath.
Right.
He's given you a chance to come to him, and I defended it theologically to my shame. But you realize they're gonna, now that you're out and you realize that was ridiculous, they're gonna still do some of that stuff. And I remember the first time I thought of this phrase of like, when you believe monstrous things long enough, it kind of makes you turn into a monster. That that's what I was, and that's what they still are. And you realize the gulf between our worldviews is it's just getting bigger as time goes on, as well as just the general sense of rationality. Like you really believe in the virgin birth and the resurrection and Jesus walking on water, like that. Just the more that you just kind of sit on that, it just feels like that feels like mythology, and in my mind, it certainly is. But
Yeah.
they're stuck in the atrocities, they're stuck in the mythology, and they think it's all good and it's all real. And
Yeah.
you're
I
like,
mean,
wow, this breaks your heart.
yeah, it's kind of funny because like the more I stopped believing, I actually kind of started reading the Bible more, which, I think a lot of Christians, I mean, a lot of ex-Christians or atheists may do this. It's like you start rereading the Bible and seeing all of the crazy things that you went along with. And it's like, wow. Because a lot of people in Christianity talk about God being a loving God, and he's the same God and he never changes. Yet, like in stories like the Great Flood, um, so God basically, he said, and I can't remember what scripture, I think it's in Exodus, but he said it repented him that he made mankind, and it grieved him to his heart. Um, and it's
Genesis
just
with
so
the
many,
flood.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
just like, so he wiped off all mankind and the animals. I'm like, what did the animals do? But I'm just like, so you're serving a God that regrets making you? Okay. I mean, there's just so many different things that you start reading in the Bible, and it's just like, did you understand this right? I mean, he okay. I mean, I mean, and they're just like references, like why are there references to slavery in the Bible at all? I mean, it's just so many small things that you just start seeing, and you don't think about it while you're in it. You're just like, well, it must make sense somehow. You just go along with it. But there's just so many like small stories that there are a lot of stories in the Bible that are not appropriate for kids. But they'll give a Bible and put Bibles in hotels and put them everywhere in public. But if you go to certain scriptures, you start reading things like somebody comparing their genital to a horse's or something like that. And it's just like, you want your kids reading? Okay. See, this Bible is not exactly age appropriate for everybody, but I'm just saying, like, read the Bible and you will probably start to see these crazy things and not think people are so crazy.
Yeah.
That's my logical thinking on it, but people just don't. Like, they just read it and they try and put it in the context of God is good
Yeah.
and it
Exactly.
has its purpose. And I just, it's funny because, like I said, I will read over some of these same scriptures and be thinking the same way that they're thinking. And now I look back at myself and I'm like, what were you it's right there. It's like, wow, okay. But it's, yeah, coming out of it, I'd say being an ex-Christian gives me two views, and everybody that's like an ex-Christian or ex-religious, they have two views because they know what it's like to be in it, and they also know what it's like to be out of it. And it's just, it's a unique perspective because I can understand where a lot of people are coming from when they say certain things, but then where I'm at right now can get very agitated by it because it's just like, oh my goodness, you're still there. Okay. And then you have to figure out how to address them and how to not elevate the conversation so that it turns into like this heated debate or an argument or anything. And sometimes it's just like you can't do anything. They just have a made up mind. Like some people at my old church, they used to sing a song that they have a made up mind to serve the Lord. And to me, that's the worst kind right there, because that means no matter what new information comes along, no matter what is proven to be true or false, you just have a made up mind to serve the Lord. Okay. Um,
That's crazy. Can I ask,
yeah.
with talking about the two different worlds that you are in, but having been in it and now out of it, could you do a quick comparison of the level of just overall peace and well-being, and the kind of the quietness of your heart? Like, how do you feel about your life and your journey on the peace level in those two different worlds? What's the difference?
Okay. Well, as a Christian, I mean, outwardly everything was peaceful. Like I told you, I had a good life in Christianity. It just started boiling down to the internal part where I didn't have that connection that I felt I needed to be um eh, I'd say to genuinely be a Christian, I'd say at that point. But technically everything else in my life was going great. I mean, I couldn't complain. But after my self-honesty experience and kind of embracing, being an agnostic atheist, I had peace of mind within because I'm like, oh, this is who I am now. Okay, so I can, my mind's no longer like, repent because you probably did something wrong that God's gonna, be mad at you for forever. It's just like, no, I'm Dre. I don't have to, I don't have to be bound by all of that mentally anymore. So there was a freedom that I definitely experienced in becoming atheist, but it's like the roles reversed. So now I have to deal with a lot outwardly that's not always that great. Um, a lot of times, well, I say first of all, I don't really have a big social life because of this. The people that I used to hang out with were usually doing things in church, which I used to be doing as well. But now I don't really do church stuff. So the socializing that they do is not something I can necessarily participate in all the time because it's usually discussing what they did at church while we're socializing or something like that. But outside of that, um, even just meeting people, I'm in Florida and it is kind of a religious city. Um, I meet people and they think I'm Christian. I mean, first of all, I mean, I think there's something about being black in the South that people just make an assumption that you must be spiritual, religious, or something. So I'm not. So I'm just a nice guy. So I encounter people and they're just like, "Oh man, you have a blessed day. God do this and such for you." And I'm just trying to just like let it go off. But after you hear that so many times, it just becomes so annoying. And you're trying to be nice to people, because like I said, I'm not a contentious person or anything, but I can't really openly say much about it because it makes for a contentious conversation. And I do my best to try to navigate how I should deal with these things in life because this, I'm not going back to it. So it's just like, how do I deal with this? How do I navigate having to experience this all the time? Perfect example, which is kind of funny to me, but we recently had tornadoes in the city of Tallahassee, and one went through our backyard.
Wow.
Fortunately, me and my family were okay, but there was a cleanup crew from it was a religious organization. I didn't know it was a religious organization at the time when I called because they were offering free services. So they came out and they said that they're with a certain organization, and we were discussing them helping clean up the damage that was done in our property. So I was like, okay, cool. I really appreciate this. And they're like, yeah, so you go to church or anything? And then there's a segue because they actually brought their chaplain. And so, he was asking, do you go to church? And of course, I this is the last thing that was on my mind that I'm thinking we're gonna be having a conversation about. So I was just like, no, I'm not a religious person. And then he started asking, like, well, when was the last time you went to church? Are you looking for a church home? And then I had to just kind of tell him, look, I'm atheist. And I mean, I could see the expression on his face just kind of went down like they didn't expect it. But we had about maybe a 10-15 minute conversation about it. And he was talking about the trees that fell right behind my house and not on the house. He was saying, like, so you think this right here was just a coincidence? I'm like, yeah, I do. I mean, this could have blown either way, but he felt it was God. And I told him, look, I understand that's what you believe, and it's no disrespect to you at all. This is just like I was telling you earlier, this is my journey in life. This is my path. This the experiences that I've had in life have just led me not to believe in God. And it's not that I have a problem with you believing in God. It's just I don't share the same sentiments about the God you believe in. And he was still trying to talk some things that would, I guess, maybe encourage people that already believe. And that's the funny thing. Usually when they talk like this to people, it's like they already kind of believe, or they fear the Lord, but they might not be going to church or something. But no, I'd already like been through that, and then I'm out, and then I'm just like full blown atheist. So we're having a conversation, and he's trying these small tactics, and I'm like, no, I don't believe. I really don't believe. I mean, and they asked to pray for me, right before they left, and I was just like, I prefer not. And I was trying to do it in the nicest way I can because it's just like I'm telling you, I'm atheist. I really don't want anything to do with that. I mean, I didn't say it like that, but it's only but so much niceness you can be when people don't leave you alone about it or start to criticize you about it. And fortunately, they didn't criticize me about it. I think it just caught them off guard because, again, down here in the South, most Black people are Christian or they're part of some type of religious organization. I'm not. And, I guess he didn't expect me to be like friendly about it or whatever, because I told him, look, we don't have to go along to get along. We can just, we can love each other and have our own views, learn how to communicate with each other. But I mean, I don't believe, and I appreciate y'all doing this service, but I'm not interested in going to the church or whatever that you're trying to invite me to.
Yeah,
Because it was kind
it's
of one of those things where it's like you get a service, but then there's the attachment. That's the catch right there. So like, do you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, basically? And it's like I think I handled it fairly decently because again, we left on good terms. We shook hands, and I was trying to be as nice of a human being as I can be that doesn't believe in what they believe. So I guess it went well because they were smiling when they left. We had a few jokes after that. It might have been on the surface, but still, it wasn't like a knockdown, drag out debate, argument, whatever. And I count it as a win. But with that being said, I experience things like that all the time. I mean, it's just I wish there was a way to explain to people of faith that, it's not that we're trying to boast in being atheists. It's just we don't believe, and that's it. Like atheism is not a religion. It's just a belief. Like it's basically saying I don't believe in a god or gods. That's it. It doesn't tell you anything about my personality. It doesn't tell you anything about my other beliefs. That's all it says. And so just trying to get information to explain to people that that's all an atheist is just somebody that doesn't believe in a god or gods. I mean, morality, you can't base morality off of that. I mean, I've asked people this, and it's really funny, like a lot of people say, well, what's your moral compass? And I'm like, okay, so before you believed in God, what was your moral compass? Like, how did you come to the conclusion that God is good? Like, how did you even, if you weren't with God already, if you weren't believing in God already, how did you make up in your mind that God must be good? Because I need to understand this. Because if you have a moral compass to decide that God is good, why can't I have a moral compass like before any of that too? I mean, I don't get it.
mm,
And I mean, these are like small little things that they say to kind of make it seem like you're just like an evil person, but it's just like no, I mean, I do the same things you do. If I see somebody in trouble, I'll try to help them. I mean, it's just like human. It's like human morals. It's not necessarily Christian morals. It's just like human morals. Like humanity wants to survive, so humanity will help itself to survive. But that, I mean, I can get into a whole nother conversation. But
yeah, I
yeah,
completely agree. And I was just going to make a quick comment in a funny sense about the tornado.
mhm,
It's weird that they would say like about the tree falling in a safe place or something, like because there's tornadoes and hurricanes all the time that kill people and take down entire homes. Like,
right.
yeah, like okay, so if you're going to claim this one was the act of God that it's safe, then the one next week in North Carolina that killed 20 people, like so that's God too, and it's weird. It's a very weird. Their memory is very selective, but I know
The funny thing about that story is he had just told me about another family that they were going to be helping where a tree fell and like split their house in half.
well,
So I was just like, yeah, I mean, I'm atheist. I'm like, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. So I'm like, so what are you saying about the family that you had to help that had the tree that destroyed their home and it didn't happen to me? It's like, okay, yeah. So I mean, it wasn't much for him to say because it's just like I'm just saying it's coincidence. I'm not saying that any force helped me or I got lucky. I mean, I that's the only thing I can see it because my neighbors had damage to their home or structure or whatever, and I didn't. So it's just like it just happened to be where the tornado came through. eh, We got lucky. They didn't get lucky. I don't think it has anything to do with God because otherwise, why did God even put it close to our houses to destroy stuff? Like, I mean,
yeah,
because
I
if you
think
really
too when
start looking at it, yeah, when you start looking at it like that, well, this is destruction. So you're saying that God just felt like twirling his finger and destroying stuff for no reason? I mean, come on.
and even if like regardless of some of those incidentals that happen occasionally, like just there's stuff that happens on a regular basis, like kids dying of starvation and
Right,
en masse, and kids dying of cancer every single day,
right,
and your hearts go out to the people that are facing that because you're like, this is awful. This is that child's precious life, and you're like, God's behind all that. So whether or not he makes that tree fall in your house or not, It's like it's just it's a fact. It's a basic fact that God is letting or directly causing thousands
Exactly.
of children to die every single day. I just it's hard to imagine that they can look past it. But again, I understand it because I look past it. But you hope, just like you kind of become a better person yourself when you deconvert. You
Yeah.
keep hoping that they're going to become a better version of themselves too, and think through this stuff and realizing again that when you think monstrous thoughts long enough, it does kind of make you into a monster. I do want to ask. I know we've gone over a lot of your story, and I appreciate your insights so much. I do want to leave just a couple minutes here towards the end here to ask about what you're kind of doing at this point, because you've become involved in something that's I think is pretty amazing. Um, you're taking your skills that you previously would have said, I'm using this talent for the Lord
Mm.
and the kingdom, and now you're using it for rationality and obviously for a lot of fun, but you're using it to help people escape and to heal. I'm going to start with what I know, but I'm sure there's more to this. But the godless gospel. Could
Mhm.
you tell us how you got involved, what it is, how people can watch it, or if it's on YouTube, or if it's going to be just only live? Like, what is it? And then, if you could, after you've talked about the godless gospel presentations, just like what is your overall goal to use your time and your energy and your skill set, your amazing skill set, for to help other people to escape and to heal going forward?
Well, I was contacted by Mandisa from Black Nonbelievers. She told me that Dan Barker with Freedom from Religion Foundation was trying to do a Godless Gospel project. And so I thought, well, this would probably be a good fit for me because I've dedicated my whole life to gospel music pretty much. And now I just don't have anything to do with it. Well, at least in the sense of, just like how I used to do it. But I spoke with Dan. We had a few conversations. He came by my house and we worked on some of his original tunes. And he asked me if I could write a couple of tunes, and I did. And so we started looking for musicians and singers, and we put something together. So that's how I kind of got started. But I I thought about it because I've always been this way about music in general. It's just like, especially gospel music. Gospel music doesn't really. It's it's not really defined in itself. Like most people that say gospel music, they may think of a sound, but they also associate it with the lyrics. They don't necessarily associate the music by itself as a genre all the time. So it kind of, and to me, and I think other genres might kind of be like this too. But um, I'm just like, this is gospel music. I enjoy playing the style, but I don't really. The message doesn't resonate with me anymore. So what if we came up with something for people that enjoy gospel music, the actual style of gospel music, musically, and put some lyrics that they could relate to, on top? And so that's kind of how we started working on Godless Gospel. It's just like,
Hmm.
okay, well, these are lyrics that atheists can actually relate to. And it just depends on where you are on your stage. But I mean, like, it's more or less just kind of telling our stories. Like, same thing that's done in gospel music a lot of times. People tell their stories about their experiences with God. Well, it's just us telling our experiences without having God or not experiencing God. And those things resonate with people, whether it be a poem or whatever. We just decided to take the route of songs.
Hmm.
So
Where could
it had
people see it at this point?
what's that?
Like, where could people see it if they wanted to actually see it? Is it only live? Is it on YouTube? Like, what are the options to watch this?
We have some clips on YouTube if you look up Godless Gospel, but you can also go to the website at godlessgospel.org. Um, yeah, we're still like actively looking for singers and musicians to kind of like, let things grow, but it's really kind of still in its infancy stages. I know it's kind of a different concept, and a lot of people look at it like godless gospel. What is that? And I get it. I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron to a degree, but I mean, if you really listen to what we're saying, it's like the style of gospel music with lyrics that non-believers can relate to. It's kind of like secular music, but more specific for non-believers. So, and nobody says anything about, gospel music if it's used with like R&B or any other style of music. But just to be fair, gospel music has pretty much stolen from every genre that's out there. If you mix it with gospel and anything else is just considered gospel because there's a certain feel that it has if it's played a certain way. It's hard to explain sometimes, but a lot of gospel musicians and singers will recognize it instantaneously, but um, they don't own it. They don't own that sound. Nobody owns music. Nobody owns any musical style sound, and at least in my perspective.
Yeah.
So me being that I was raised in it and I devoted a lot of time to creating for Christian artists, I'm like, now that I'm not in, I can still use this for something that I can feel like I'm connected to, and that's really what drew me in. I felt like I could still do something that I'm good at and still be connected to the lyrics. And I mean, that means a lot to me because I can't talk about this all the time. And even with Godless Gospel, I don't really talk about it all the time. I do share it with people, but it's it's like any other genre. It's not for everybody. I mean, it's probably more of a niche than anything, but there are a lot of people out there that, I mean, they want to still. In fact, I run into a lot of atheists that actually like gospel music. They like singing along with gospel music because they don't really have an alternative. It's like they grew up in it, and the music itself just kind of like resonates with them. The lyrics, not much so, but then you might have a great singer, and that singer's voice resonates with them. And it seems like I'm getting really technical, but it's just like all of this stuff is put together like a cake, and you can't really just separate it. So they'll sing the lyrics that probably irritate them, but it just sounds good all together. So now we have an alternative to where, okay, we're creating music that's like that, but you don't have to like try to pick out the raisins that you don't like or whatever. It's like
Right.
you
When
can
is
just
the
the whole
next
thing
live
resonate.
performance, by the way? And where is it?
I'm not sure right now. We were scheduled to go to New York, but we had to cancel due to some complications.
Okay.
But we're still working on finishing up the album. So I'll probably get with Dan and see when our next performance will be. But I don't think we have one scheduled right now. But
But
we've done
people
two
can at least buy
performances.
the album or download it shortly.
Hopefully shortly. Yeah, we're finishing up the album right now.
That's
But
awesome.
if anything, definitely go to godlessgospel.org. That will have all information about the project that we're working on.
Mm, that's awesome. And just again, going to like the big picture, is there anything else on your radar for how you kind of want to use your energy and time to help the community or just get involved and have a lot of fun and make an impact at the same time?
Yeah, because I don't know if it's gonna sound bad or funny or whatever, but um I am wholeheartedly atheist, but I guess I've gotten to a point because of my experiences in life. It's more or less I'm just kind of getting to a place where I just want to really enjoy life now. And to a degree, yes, I'm an advocate and an activist about atheism, but I don't like to argue. I don't like to get into debates. I'd never probably get into like a serious debate about what I believe because first of all, they don't start off right. Like if we're gonna presuppose that there's a God, how does that work? I mean, you can't. That's not starting on equal playing ground. But um, I'm just trying to enjoy life and leave a positive mark on humanity before I die. That's all I really think I can do. Like I was telling you earlier, I've gotten more into filmmaking. It's something I've kind of become passionate about. I still do music, don't get me wrong, but I really am more passionate about filmmaking. So maybe I'll be able to do a documentary on myself or other people about my experience from being inside of Christianity to becoming atheist and just that journey. I know a
Mm,
lot of people have shared their story, but everybody's story is different. There are just certain things or certain little elements that will probably resonate with people out there that might not resonate with somebody else's story. So I'm trying to get up the nerve to kind of just put that together and make a documentary. And
mm,
maybe not just about myself, but just others that have kind of, shared the same similar journey.
yeah.
Because you can just never hear the story too many times because this happens every day, but then a lot of people are scared to talk about it because it's such a controversial thing. Like, of course, to us, I mean, being an atheist is nothing brand new, but to a lot of people that aren't experienced in having conversations or dialogue with people of other faiths or other beliefs, it can kind of feel like a culture shock to them sometimes when they talk because they don't
Absolutely.
necessarily even know how to talk to you. It's like they don't know how to respect you sometimes, and you have to kind of be the bigger person to explain that, you saying this is kind of offensive, and I don't know if you realize it, but just trying to explain stuff. And that's the type of person I am. I really want to leave a positive mark on humanity. So if that's by joining people together, um, that'll probably be something that I try to do more of. But like I said, I'm wholeheartedly atheist. People don't see that all the time. In fact, I've even been questioned if I'm really atheist, and people would say you look like you're more agnostic or whatever. And I'm like, I'm agnostic atheist, but I think that's when people don't really understand the difference between agnosticism and being an atheist.
Yeah,
But
for
yeah,
sure.
I'm a down to earth guy that's just trying to leave a positive mark on humanity before I check out.
Mm. Well, that's a good segue to my last question. The idea of leaving a mark is obviously also through our children.
Mhm.
How has your deconversion and your subsequent, process of thinking through a lot of the ramifications of that and the healing and all that, how has that affected the way that you parent, certainly compared to the way you would have parented as a conservative fundamentalist Christian, where everything is about God and Jesus. But like, how has it even progressed further as you've continued to go down this path? What is it like parenting as an agnostic atheist?
Well, I mean, I spoke to my wife before we had kids. I mean, we both agreed not to raise them religious, which is a good thing. But I don't even share like my atheist views with my kids like that. I just want them to have like a neutral upbringing so that once they get to, I'd say, the appropriate age to kind of start learning about beliefs and all like that, they won't be indoctrinated either way. So like I was indoctrinated, so I didn't have a choice. It just church is what it was going to be either way. But for my kids, we just raise them as kids, like neutrally. Like they don't go to church, they don't go to atheist conventions or anything. We let them watch cartoons. I'm cautious about the people I allow around them. I'm cautious about the things that they watch on TV, the places they go, the environments that might have exposure to a lot of religious stuff. I mean, it's a lot of extra work because society is just really, really religious. So just trying to let your kids have a neutral environment to be in can be tough, but that's what I really believe in. I think it's important that kids are allowed to just be kids, and when they get to the appropriate age, you guide them through the process of thinking, thinking about things, learning about things, studying about things, and then let them make educated choices. But if it's pushed on them from childbirth, or if they're just indoctrinated, they if they have to do like me, it's gonna be rough. Like I didn't deconvert until I was like 30 something. So um yeah, a lot of wasted time, but
Yeah.
um I don't want that to happen to my kids. So I just want them to be able to be kids, and I want them to make good choices when they get older. If they do decide to become Christian or Buddhist, or if they become atheist, I'll love them either way because they're my kids. I only have one set of kids. I don't think I'm having any more. But that's the thing. Like I was saying, like just drawing bridges. Like if my kids do decide to go in another way, it's going to be really important for me to keep the connection I have with my kids and be able to communicate with them and love them and treat them fairly and all that kind of stuff. Because just because they go a different way in life about beliefs doesn't mean I should just write them off. I mean, I definitely don't want to write off my own kids. That's would be the worst experience. But I definitely want my kids to go into whatever they go into with knowledge and understanding.
Mm. Well said. I love it. I love it. Well, this has been awesome. I'm so glad I finally got a chance to connect with you, and so glad that Dan Barker introduced me, to you and to your music. I did see a little bit of it before the Godless Gospel, so it's amazing stuff. And I honestly, truly am like jealous of your skill set. I really do wish I had gone more into music, and at this point too, animation would be very helpful. Um, but at the end of the day, it's just you deal with the cards you're given, and you do your
Yeah.
best. So I appreciate though that you're taking your skills and using them in such a beautiful way, because music makes such a difference to our lives, to our hearts, to healing. And in some ways, some of this stuff might end up truly helping people to just heal and get past their the hardest parts of this journey. And so it's great. I appreciate it so much. So thank you for what you're doing there. I know I asked you a lot of questions, but before we wrap up, did you have any other parts of your journey you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Every time I tell my story, I feel like I missed something, but
Know what you mean?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much, and that's why I keep saying it. There's just so much, so much. But I think that's about it. I mean, if I want anybody to remember anything about me, I just want them to know that I consider myself to be a person of love. Like I said, I'm not a contentious person. I am atheist, but I do believe that we can all coexist. We can all get along. We just have to learn how to understand each other and learn how to communicate with each other because that's the only way we can make this work.
Hmm. Well said. Agreed. Yeah, it's so important to at least try. Can't do it in every case, but to at least try and not burn bridges and just leave the doors open for future conversations. So it's a
Right.
shame. I do feel bad. I've talked to enough people to know that sometimes, at least at the time of the interview or whatever, that the shunning was intense and that there was no open door. But it is important, I think, to at least try, like you're saying. And so I think too, some people really do look back, years later and think, I was as a Christian, I was the jerk, and the other person was doing an honest soul searching, but came to
Yeah.
different conclusions, and I rejected them. I didn't listen to their pain. I didn't listen to their questions, to their
Right.
intellectual honesty. And a lot of people, I think it's a lot of us eat crow, as they say, when you go through it eventually yourself, you're like, oh, now I see what you were going through. I couldn't see it before. I couldn't understand your journey, but now I see. And now I see I really either was rude to you or I just kind of ignored you. And it's like, yep, got it now. I was way, way off and I was very insensitive to your journey. I think some people will go down that path, but obviously for a lot of us, we don't really know if they'll cross that path and make amends or not. But I think it's
Yeah.
it's great that you're trying to be the kind of person that would say effectively, if the Christians that are being so obnoxious to us, as is so often the case, if they ever do turn and reconsider their stance, that they're going to think of us as a friend, not an enemy.
Yeah. And it's not always easy to take that stance because I mean, you have a lot of people that aggressively come at you just because you don't believe. Like I literally I closed my Facebook account because I had so much criticism. Like I went publicly about being atheist in 2015. I made a post, and it got like several hundred shares and all that kind of stuff. Because
Well,
I have a following, when it comes to music and even with the animation stuff. But I put it up. I had people that don't even know me just saying negative stuff. People saying, there's no exit in hell. You're saying, oh, you're just going through a phase, or God's not pleased. It's just so much stuff, and it got worse than that. But it was like every day was a debate, and I just didn't feel like it. I mean, I was trying to leave myself open as a beacon to other people that might be going through the same thing I was going through because, as I said earlier, I didn't know anybody when I started going through my self-honesty process. And it would be nice to kind of like have somebody that's openly saying, "Hey, you can speak to me about if you're questioning things, like even if you're not trying to leave but you just have questions, we can have a conversation." I mean, that was the type of person I was trying to be, but it was just I'm a human being, and it's just like overwhelming sometimes. So you get so much negative criticism just for trying to help other people. It just seems like they think I was helping them in the wrong direction, of course.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. I mean, hopefully, the good thing is I think a lot of people are kind of seeing that you know religion that's not really where it's at. I mean, I think a lot of people are really kind of just seeing that in general. I think there's been a decline in people going to church and stuff, and not just because of COVID, but they're just starting to see things. They're starting to see people's actions, and they might get to the same place that I've gotten to for different reasons. But with whatever helps them get there, I consider it a good thing. But at the end of the day, I still want them to be honest with themselves. That's what's going to lead you to the place that you'll probably really stay rooted, like when you're honest with yourself.
mm, well said, well said. Yeah, it is a truism that Christianity does seem to be in the decline, and that people are talking more and more about deconstruction, and so it does seem like a bit of a snowball effect to the point where it'd be hard for people to ignore it. Although I've seen some people use the illustrate or the verses that just say that I think is First Timothy or Second Timothy that in the end times there will be a huge falling away, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is just proof of, this is what God prophesied. But anyway, yeah, and I love your heart in this. You've got a real beautiful heart, and
Thanks.
it's just like I remember when we were Christians, we would talk about and even sing, "They'll know we're Christians by our love," and
Mhm.
hopefully in a parallel sense, they'll know you're a really really good agnostic atheist by your love, and it definitely shines through. So thank you so much. It's great to hear your story. Great to get to know you. I'll wrap up then by saying we've been speaking with Andre Forbes. Andre, thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your music. Thank you for your animation that we'll, I'm sure, see at some point. Great to get to know you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye bye.